The darkness over the Williams farm was heavy with tension, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Caleb crouched by the main house, the cold barrel of a flashlight rifle resting against his arm, scanning the fields through night vision goggles. Beside him, Amara gripped a heavy flashlight, nerves steeled. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now, under the cloak of 2:17 a.m., it had finally come. The black-clad figures moved like shadows through the tall grass, thinking they would find easy prey, thinking they would overwhelm a few tired farmers and townspeople with their brute force and darkness. But they didn't know who they were facing. They didn't know that Caleb Williams had turned this land into a fortress. At the far edge of the property, the first wave of attackers tripped a series of hidden alarms, homemade but devastating. Motion-triggered floodlights ignited across the fields, turning night into a harsh white noon. From every direction came the blast of horns, sirens, even the clanging of old farm bells Amara had rigged along the perimeter. It was chaos, and it was perfect. The first line of contractors staggered, momentarily disoriented. That was all the time Caleb needed. From hidden bunkers dug into the fields, townsfolk burst forth, armed not with guns but with cameras, live-streaming every movement. Their phones lit the night with 1,000 tiny screens, broadcasting the invasion to the world. The attackers regrouped quickly, shouting orders to push toward the caves. That was their real target, the evidence buried deep beneath the Williams farm. Caleb anticipated it. As they advanced, they ran straight into the second line of defense, a human barrier of farmers, grandmothers, and teenagers standing shoulder to shoulder, unarmed except for their determination. The contractors barked commands, ordering them to disperse. No one moved. Not a single person flinched. Cameras caught everything, the tension, the shoves, the fist clenching on batons, the gleaming tears of fear and pride in people's eyes. And then one of the contractors made a fatal mistake. He shoved a teenage boy so hard he stumbled to the ground, scraping his knees on the dirt. A gasp rose from the crowd, then a roar. In a tidal wave of bodies, the community surged forward, not with violence but with defiance. They locked arms, they chanted, they refused to move. Our land, our truth, our home. The chant shook the very earth beneath their feet. The contractors, realizing brute force was being broadcast to millions now watching the live stream, hesitated. Caleb seized the moment. He stepped forward, standing tall under the blinding lights, and spoke into the cameras with the full force of his battle-hardened voice. "You came here thinking you could erase us," he said, every word sharp as a blade. "You thought you could destroy our homes, bury our history, poison our children, and walk away clean. Not tonight. Not ever. You see, this land isn't just soil and stone. It's blood. It's memory. It's every voice that was ever silenced and every hand that ever sowed hope into this ground. You can't bulldoze that. You can't burn it. You can't erase it. We are still here." The chant rose higher, stronger, echoing into the night sky. The contractors, now caught between a furious crowd and the harsh eye of national media, faltered. Their comms crackled with panic. Orders barked to retreat. It was too late. From the tree line, state police vehicles, FBI SUVs, and national media vans roared onto the property. Sirens blared. Floodlights bathed the field. And behind them came even more people, church groups, activists, civil rights leaders, drawn by the broadcasts, drawn by the undeniable gravity of the fight happening here tonight. Facing exposure, arrest, and national humiliation, the private contractors had no choice. They dropped their weapons. They surrendered. Hands in the air, they were marched to waiting state vehicles, their faces illuminated by the flash of 100 cameras. Caleb turned to Amara, his face battered by exhaustion but lit from within by something harder than victory, by justice. "It's over," she whispered, grabbing his hand. "For tonight," Caleb replied, voice hoarse but unbroken. "But tomorrow, we rebuild. We plant. We tell our story until they can't cover it up anymore. We don't just survive, Amara. We rise." Behind them, the sun was just beginning to stain the eastern sky with gold. On the Williams farm, under the battered flags and broken fences, something new was taking root. Not just crops. Not just homes. Hope. Unbreakable. Irrefutable. Eternal. By sunrise, the Williams farm had become more than just a battleground. It was a symbol. News cameras captured the broken fences, the trampled fields, the makeshift barricades of farm tools and old furniture. But most of all, they captured the people, black, white, brown, young, old, standing side by side in defiance and pride, refusing to be erased. Amara stood on the porch of the battered farmhouse, Elijah clinging to her side, watching as Caleb gave a quiet debrief to the state investigators now swarming the property. Tessa's phone buzzed constantly with new updates, offers of legal representation, interviews from national media, even politicians pledging support. It was overwhelming. It was electric. It was terrifying. "They're saying we made history," Tessa said, her voice shaking slightly as she lowered her phone. "They're calling it the stand at Williams' farm." Amara looked around her. At the ruins and the resurrection. At the community that had bled beside her. At her son, whose future now gleamed with possibilities instead of fear. "We didn't make history," she said softly. "We reclaimed it." As the day unfolded, statements poured in from across the country. Civil rights groups. Environmental advocates. Lawmakers. What happened on this farm, this forgotten patch of earth that corrupt men had once thought they could bulldoze without consequence, was igniting something larger. Questions were being asked in places that had long ignored the silent suffering of communities like theirs. Investigations into Vanguard Dominion expanded to other states. Hearings were scheduled. Arrests were made. But for Amara, the true victory was simpler. That night, under a sky stretched wide with stars, she sat on the cracked steps of her porch with Elijah tucked under her arm, listening to the chorus of crickets and frogs return to a land that was healing itself. Caleb sat nearby, whittling a piece of wood into a rough carving of a hawk, the symbol their grandfather had once used for resilience. "We'll rebuild," Elijah said sleepily against her shoulder. "Yes, we will," Amara whispered into his hair. "Not just the farm, not just their home, but their trust, their voice, their future." Days turned into weeks. The Williams farm became a gathering place for those fighting their own battles against injustice. Workshops on land rights. Forums on environmental healing. Story circles where old wrongs were named and remembered, not buried in shame. The memorial garden blossomed with wildflowers and homemade markers, a living reminder that the past would not be forgotten. One crisp morning, as the first frost silvered the fields, Amara stood before a new sign planted proudly at the farm's entrance, Williams Freedom Grounds. Beneath it, in smaller letters, a place for truth, healing, and hope. Caleb approached, his face calmer now, the shadows of war slowly receding from his eyes. He handed her a folded sheet of paper, an official deed, stamped and sealed, recognizing the Williams family as the undisputed owners of the land in perpetuity. No loopholes. No contest. "Free and clear," he said with a rare smile. Tears blurred Amara's vision. Not because of the land itself, though it was precious, but because of what it meant, that for once, they had not been defeated. That the sacrifices of generations had not been in vain. Around them, life pulsed and hummed. Children's laughter from the community schoolhouse Carmen had helped build. The low hum of conversation and the smell of fresh bread from the shared kitchens. Hope. Real, tangible, noisy, glorious hope. As the sun set, bathing the Williams Freedom Grounds in molten gold, Amara took Elijah's hand. Together, with Caleb and Carmen and Tessa, they walked the perimeter of their land. Past the newly planted orchards. Past the clearing where the memorial stones caught the light like silent witnesses. Past the fields where resilient crops had taken root against all odds. When they reached the old lightning-struck oak, the secret second entrance to the caves, they paused. Elijah bent down and planted a small sapling, a gift from the children of the town. New life rising from old scars. "It's not just ours anymore," Elijah said quietly. "No," Amara agreed, her voice full. "It belongs to everyone who refuses to be erased." That night, as the stars blanketed the sky and a bonfire crackled at the center of the farm, Amara looked out at the faces gathered around her. Faces that had once been strangers, now bound by a shared battle and a shared dream. She raised a hand, and silence fell. "This is just the beginning," she said. "They tried to silence us. They tried to bury the truth. But they forgot one thing." She smiled, fierce and bright and unbreakable. "We are the seeds." And the crowd, all of them, raised their voices in a thunderous cheer that echoed across the hills, across the broken ground, across a nation waking up to a truth too long ignored. The Williams farm had stood for generations. Now it would stand forever, as proof that no amount of corruption, no force of greed or hatred, could ever extinguish a people who chose to rise.